Hello friends! How did you find this story? I am sure you must have enjoyed listening to it. Now, let's have a brief discussion on the story so that we can answer the questions given in the exercise. The story begins with Roger, a teenage boy, and Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, an older woman walking home from work late one night. He attempts to steal her purse, but because it is so heavy and Mrs. Jones is quite stout, he merely ends up breaking the strap instead. She kicks him and grabs him by the shirt, asking if he feels ashamed of himself. Roger admits that he does. Mrs. Jones notices that his face is dirty and his hair is uncombed. She asks if anyone looks after him. When he answers no, she drags him home with her. When Roger and Mrs. Jones arrive at her home, she asks if he's had to supper. She assumes that since he was trying to steal her purse, he must be hungry. But we learn that he wanted her money to buy a pair of blue sweat shoes. When Mrs. Jones tells Roger that he could have asked her for the money, he doesn't quite believe her. Mrs. Jones explains to Roger that she was young once and couldn't afford the things she wanted. She confides that, like the teenage boy, she used to do some pretty shameful things too. At the end of the story, Mrs. Jones gives Roger $10 to buy the blue sweat shoes and tells him not to steal her purse or anyone else's for that matter, as shoes purchased with stolen money cause more trouble than they're worth. When she leads him to the door and bids him good night, Roger wants to say something other than "Thank you, ma'am," but nothing suitable comes to mind. As he turns to look at Mrs. Jones in the doorway, he can barely get the words "thank you" out of his mouth before she shuts the door. Now let's discuss some difficult words and their meanings. Slung means to loop around, usually used for straps for the bags. Taking full blast means to dash at full speed. Rattle means to make sounds, short and sharp. Stooping is an act of bending the body forward and downward. A frail person is weak physically. Willow wild means extremely thin. To pop out means to come out. Suede is a kind of soft leather used for making bags and shoes. Frowning is an act in which a person moves his eyebrows to show perplexing action. Embarrass means to cause shame. Latching into means getting hold of, getting possession of. All right, now, since you know the meaning of the difficult words, you may reread the story again, and you will find it easier. For question and answer, you must visit the next section of this lesson. All right, now, since you know the meaning of the difficult words, you may reread the story again, and you will find it easier. For question and answer, you must visit the next section of this lesson.